Yes. Oh, here they are.
Yep.
Here they are.
As I said, and as the microphone just indicated, I will not introduce Michael except to say that we've all benefited from Michael's time at Christ Church. We've all benefited from the nearly 30 years that Michael has been in Milwaukee. And we've all enjoyed the weekly broadcast commentaries about music at Christ Church that Michael prepares from time to time. Today, he has the seasonal topic of sacred music and the season of Lent.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to have this opportunity to chat with you a bit about the music. I do want to say I have a spasmodic dysphonia, so this is as good as it gets. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt. But I'm a little raspy, especially after church on Sunday. So hopefully, my plan for this time with you this morning is to connect dots and to put some context into what we're singing this year during Lent and why. So I think the first thing we need to do at the outset is chat a little bit about Lent. So I do want to say I don't do many of these presentations, though when I have, I like interaction. I don't want to just stand here and talk to you. I'd like to talk with you. So let me ask, what is Lent? When you think Lent, or when you think of Lent, what do you think? What's your experience?
It's the, okay, well, that too, right? Giving something up, but sort of having a 40-day penitent time.
40-day penitent time, giving something up, denial. Jim? Or
a time to turn back.
A time to turn back, interesting. What do you remember from your Lenten experiences from years gone by, growing up, college, high school, whatever?
Mite boxes. Verity Lake.
Mite boxes, wow, yes. Mite boxes, and does everybody know what mite boxes are? Those are, explain, Melody, mite boxes.
In our church when we were little, and I think a lot of people did this, there were these little boxes with a slit on the top, and you collected it all during Lent. You brought them in on the Saturday afternoon before Easter service, and I don't know where the money went.
Sure.
Surely to a good cause.
There was the three pillars of Lent: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So the mite boxes were part of the almsgiving. So when you're young, you don't buy the candy bar. You put, back then it was probably quarter or 15 cents that you would have used to buy the candy bar. You put it in the mite box, and then it would go towards some sort of outreach. Anything else? Lent? Your understanding? What are your thoughts of Lent?
Reflection.
Reflection.
Yeah.
Interesting. Everything turns purple. Everything turns purple, so it looks different. It sounds different. I think over the years, I've come to appreciate the prayers of the liturgy. And when I was here for the Ash Wednesday service, the 5:30 Ash Wednesday service, which Father Matt was leading, he, after the homily, began the Liturgy of the Ashes. And if you look at the top of your outline, this comes directly from the prayer book. This is the only thing I'm going to be reading to you, but I think it's vitally important. Dear people of God, the first Christians observed with great devotion the days of our Lord's passion and resurrection. and it became the custom of the church to prepare for them by a season of penitence and fasting. The season of Lent provided a time in which converts to the faith were prepared for holy baptism. This was also a time when those who, because of notorious sins, had been separated from the body of the faithful were reconciled by penitence and forgiveness and restored us to the fellowship of the church. Thereby, the whole congregation was put in mind of the message of pardon and absolution set forth in the gospel of our Savior, and of the need which all Christians continually have to renew their repentance of and faith. When Father Matt read that, a light bulb went off on me. I'm like, there we go. The church says right here what Lent is all about. There was a particular line that in this that struck me, and that is, the season of Lent provided a time in which converts to the faith were prepared for holy baptism. I grew up in the northern panhandle of West Virginia. Is it West Virginia? Up here. In a town called Weirton. It's about 25 miles north of Wheeling, about 30 miles west of Pittsburgh, and directly over the Ohio River from Steubenville. I grew up Catholic. I have 3 sisters. We all went to the elementary Catholic school. I went to the Catholic high school before I went to college. I started playing music in church when I was in elementary school. I really can't remember when. I was very young. The school I went to was pretty conservative, the parish and the school were pretty conservative. We went to Mass every morning. And at some point, I just went to the nun and said, I can play that. And she put me up there, and she would tell me what, I couldn't read music. She'd tell me what to play, and I would just play it. I could hear it and play it. Then when I went to high school, I continued on. I worked for a little bit at a Lutheran church. I'd do the 9 o'clock Mass at Sacred Heart, and I'd go to Resurrection Lutheran for 10:30. And then, actually, which was a great experience. It was right, any of you are Lutheran, it was right after the LBW, the Green Book came out. So that was a great time, great experience. Then when I went to college, I started out in pre-physical therapy because that's a nice, noble profession. And I started at the same time working part-time at a Catholic church in Morgantown. I went to West Virginia University in Morgantown. And I started working part-time at St. Teresa's. I was the assistant to the music director there, Donna Kinsey. And it was during my time there at St. Teresa's that I was introduced to the catechumenate, which was mind-blowing for me. The catechumenate is a process, now in the Catholic Church, the normative process, where adults are baptized. It's a pretty intense process, and I'll continue. I'll pick this up. I'm going to continue just a little bit more of the story. So I was at St. Teresa's, and then when I graduated from college, or I eventually switched my major to music, I decided, this physical therapy thing was nice people, but not for me. So I switched my major to music, and I graduated in December of 1985 and then moved to Maine in January of 86. That's when I started my professional career at church work started, so a little over 40 years ago. And while I was in Maine, continued working with, at that time the acronym was RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, in the parish. After 3.5 years, I moved to Richmond, Virginia, was there for 6 years, and did a graduate degree while I was there, and then moved here to Milwaukee in June of 1995 to work at St. John's Cathedral downtown. I was there for a little over 26 years. I left in May of 2021. It was a great experience, but it wore me out. It was very, very, very intense. Actually, when I left, I was looking for something to do, a little part-time. I interviewed with an Episcopal priest on the East Coast, lovely lady. And I told her, you know, it was so intense there, I could do 6 masses in 24 hours when you consider the wedding season at a cathedral. And I said, you know, it got to the point where if one more person said to me, the Lord be with you, I just wanted to slap him. So it was during my early years at the cathedral when I started getting involved with the North American Forum on the Catechumenate. It was an organization, national organization, that had teams that would go out to parishes to help them implement the catechumenate, the rite of Christian initiation of adults. So let me explain what the catechumenate is. It's a very public, communal experience of people entering the church. It begins with a period called inquiry when someone who's interested will come to the parish and say, I'm kind of interested in learning more about this Catholic tradition. Afterwards, if they continued to, if they were still interested, they would then go through what we would call the rite of acceptance. All of these rites would take place on Sunday morning. And I do want to say that the catechumenate in its purest form is for adults who aren't baptized at all. So the rite of acceptance, it basically is a ritual whereby a catechumen is introduced to the parish. Who is this person? And actually, the ritual in some of the parishes would begin with a knocking at the door. It's like the knocking at the door. It's like, well, let's go see who's here. So the person would be introduced, and then they would then their formal journey into the Catholic Church would begin. Typically, these formation periods would last roughly like an academic year. Quote unquote classes or the process begin in September and then conclude with baptisms at the Easter Vigil. Baptisms at the Easter Vigil, you're familiar with that, yes? So there's the catechumenate. Once we got to the season of Lent, the first Sunday of Lent, there was what was called, at the parish level, the rite of sending, whereby the sponsor of the catechumenate would give public testimony to the entire community on the readiness of the candidate to go for baptism. And then from the parish, they would go to the cathedral, where the bishop would formally elect them. Then we're in the season of Lent, which begins a very intense preparation for baptism. On the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Sundays of Lent, there's a ritual, what we call the scrutinies, which were which are rituals that were heavy on prayer to root out the bad and strengthen the good in the catechumens. We get to the Easter Vigil, and that's when we celebrate the baptism, confirmation, and receiving the First Communion. So a pretty intense process. It's not a rector saying, hey, I'm having Episcopal 101 classes for 3 weeks. Come and take those and you're in. Very, very, very different. And basically what the catechumenate process says is, or underscores, baptism is a very serious commitment. I was talking to Matt and Seth. Excuse me, a number of weeks ago as we were preparing for Lent, and I raised the catechumenate. And Seth said, yeah, you know, when our prayer book came out in 1979, there was an effort for the Episcopal churches to embrace the catechumenate. He said, but it never really took off. However, the catechumenate process is in the BCP, and the rituals are in the book of occasional services, which I found fascinating. Have any of you experienced a catechumenate anywhere, or anything, a process like I just described in any Episcopal churches? No, it's just not heard of. It's interesting, as I was going over my notes this morning for this, I thought, I'm going to Google Episcopal parishes with the catechumenate, and there's a smatter of them here and there, some in Washington, the Cathedral in Denver, I think there's one in Louisville, but it really hasn't taken any legs. Why am I talking about this? We all bring our own history and understanding to church on Sunday. Seth was talking about it this morning when he was referring to his evangelical background. I bring 40 or 30 years from the Catholic tradition in Lent, heavily focused on catechumenate and baptism, getting back to the line in the BCP, that Lent became a process for the adults to be baptized. So that's where I come from. I've been so heavily formed in that. When it comes to Lent, I don't think necessarily so much denial and self-mortification and all of that stuff. That's very Catholic, if I can be honest, very Catholic. But I've done a total shift with that. And if I think back to what Father Matt was talking about when he preached on the first Sunday of Lent about not giving things up, but picking things up, or not giving up, but picking up practices. So that, again, like I said, that's where I'm coming from. Now, we're in cycle A for the lectionary readings. There are 3 cycles, yes, A, B, and C. This year we're in cycle A. The cycle A readings, as it turns out, this is really somewhat fortuitous. The cycle A readings are heavily important in the catechumenate process in the Catholic Church. So we start Lent out on Lent 1, pretty much every year. I'm going to be talking the 5 Sundays of Lent, not Palm Sunday. The first Sunday of Lent, we have temptation in the desert. Today we heard about Nicodemus, and God so loved the world. The next 3, Lent 3, we have from John's Gospel, Jesus meets the woman of Samaria. Lent 4, we have Jesus heals the man born blind. And Lent 5, we have Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Those readings are a must in Catholic churches when you're celebrating these RCIA rituals. So as I was approaching music selections again for this Lent, I immediately went to the catechumenate and initiation process. Does that make sense? If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand and go with it. So, as I said, we have the 3 scrutiny gospels. So, what I'd like to do now is look at the texts. So, which I gave you. These are, I'm not going to go reading through them, but you can basically see what we're doing. So last Sunday, Lent 1, we begin with the temptation in the desert. There are 2 of the hymns that we did that I'd like to focus on. Lead Me, Guide Me. I don't know if you remember that. If you were at church last week, Lead Me, Guide Me. Gospel hymn written in 1953 by Doris Akers. African-American woman, composer, wrote over 500 gospel hymns. I personally love this hymn for a lot of reasons. I think I like the style. I think it's got I'm going back to, it's got a great beat. You can dance to it. But there's just something about that melody. And I particularly like this text for the first Sunday of Lent. Even though the season officially begins on Ash Wednesday, I tend to think that Lent 1 is when when the train really starts picking up speed. So that the text of that hymn speaks all about journey. We talk about Lent journey. We talk about the catechumenate being a journey. So here we are, we're starting this journey, and basically we're saying we're stuck in sin, and Jesus, we're looking to you to lead us through this. So that's a little bit about lead me, guide me. The second hymn that's on your handout, Jesus Tempted in the Desert. It was our sequence hymn last week. Herman Stumfley was 20th century hymn writer. Let me find my notes. He particularly wrote this text because he wanted to he wanted to demystify Jesus' experience in the desert. In other words, Jesus had this experience, but by golly, we do as well. So we have, in the first stanza, we have talking about hunger. In the second stanza, talks about the sin of pride. And in the third, the desire for power. I don't necessarily like to choose hymns that are direct quotes from the gospel. However, this one was. So I don't know if you were here last week or were able to make those connections, but right from the beginning, right when we sang this hymn, we immediately heard the story of exactly these three temptations. It's a pretty lengthy hymn. I remember talking to Nancy beforehand. I said, "There's plenty of time to get the gospel book. It's a long hymn." And I talked to Seth beforehand. I said, man, I don't know this. I said, I really like this text. I don't know about doing this for the sequence. And I said, I look at this hymn kind of like a Trinitarian hymn. You got to do all the verses for it to make sense. I mean, you don't want to sing a Trinitarian hymn, the Father, Son, and leave the Spirit out, because... and he said, no, do it. And so that was the context of the music for Lent 1. Those specifically those two hymns. So today, Be Thou My Vision. And I thought Seth's homily beautifully, much more than I could address. Speak of the devil. His homily today really underscored the whole point of using Lent as a time to take the blinders off and pray for vision. Interesting thing about that hymn, it was written in, it's Irish. It was written in the 6th century. The text by a blind monk. Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's the heat, isn't it?
It's the heat,
Yeah.
But we can turn it off, right? Okay.
Yeah. It's written by a blind monk. It's basically a prayer of protection. The text, as I was doing my research, I learned that the text got lost, and it was rediscovered in the early part of the 20th century, and it really didn't receive its poetic form until 1912 by Eleanor Hull. So that's Be My Vision. And then we end it today with I Have Decided to Follow Jesus. Have you ever sung that here before? No. Wow, you could have fooled me. With handing down the Faith Sundays, I like to find some more kid-friendly songs. And I personally have always gravitated to this very simple hymn.
It was a big children's camp song.
Oh, a big children's camp song. So we ended that today, and I selected that for a couple reasons. Number one, it's our verbally confirming ourselves to continue on this road of discipleship, renewing our commitment to discipleship. Interesting. So, little story behind this hymn. So we sang it, you heard it. I have to say that you'd think it'd be more like country western Gene Autry, music director in your parish, who wrote that. Its origins are from the country of India. It's an Indian folk hymn. I had no idea. There's the story about a gentleman, I'm going to Nokseng, Nokseng, who is attributed to having the text. He and his family became Christian. And when it was at a time when it was not good to be becoming Christian, and there were threats to him and his family. So the story goes, he and his wife witnessed the killing of their children. And his response is, I have decided to follow Jesus. And he witnesses the murder of his wife. And his response is, though none go with me, I still will follow. And then he sees his own impending execution, and his response is, the world behind me, the cross before me. Fascinating story on the history of this very simple camp song hymn. Eventually, the leader in his community was so taken by this man's faith that he and the village converted to Christianity. So now that takes us to Lent 3, Cycle A, meeting the woman of Samaria. Again, this is when those intense baptismal prayers begin. So next week, we hear the story of the woman. Jesus meets her. Her life is horrible. She's leading a very, very, very difficult life. Has made bad choices. She's struggling. So she's at the well when other people won't be there, so she won't be heckled or anything. And Jesus comes and talks to her. And Jesus tells her, I am the living water. So the hymn that I've selected to kind of highlight or this story is the hymn I heard the voice of Jesus say. It was written by Honestius Bonner, interesting, as a children's hymn. He found some of the hymns, and particularly the Psalter, too difficult for kids, so he wanted to write something that was kid-friendly. There are 3 verses. If you look at the text of the first verse, it speaks of rest. I heard the voice of Jesus say, come unto me. The second verse speaks of Jesus bringing and giving living water. And then the third verse, Jesus, I am the dark world's light. Look unto me, your morn shall rise, and all your days be bright. We're also singing next week, though I didn't give you the text, there's a wideness in God's mercy. And yesterday, I just Googled, what's the story behind this hymn? Interesting little side fact. It was written by Frederick Faber, who converted to Roman Catholicism from Anglicanism and wrote it as a Catholic hymn. But one little interesting thing I thought about, or that I learned about that hymn, is its original title was Come Unto Me. I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Kind of a bridge between there's a oneness in God's mercy and I heard the voice of Jesus. So then this takes us to Lent 4 and Jesus healing the man born blind. Okay, so like the absolute obvious hymn choice in my view is Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. Written by John Newton. John Newton was a sailor. And let's just say he led an interesting life. We'll leave it at that. Made a lot of bad choices. He was he was at sea, and there was a bad storm that came along off the coast of Ireland, and wasn't sure he was going to make it, but he did. And that was the seed of his becoming a believer. Took him a while. Eventually, he went to seminary, became a minister. I didn't know that. That was kind of an interesting little sidebar with that. And he wrote Amazing Grace as actually the original title was Faith's Review and Expectation. It was a poem that he wrote for a sermon on January 1st, 1773. It eventually became part of a collection of hymns, first published in 1779. As I said, I don't normally like to choose hymns that are like direct, direct references to the scriptures. However, to me, Lent 4, Cycle A, is Amazing Grace. And yes, I will do it on the piano. And yes, I will, as I said the last time I did on the piano, and I'm from West Virginia, so I said, told the choir every now and again the West Virginia in me comes out. So yeah, we'll get rocking on the piano with it. And then that takes us to Lent 5. Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. So this is all about Jesus. Life wins over death. Life wins over death. The absolute obvious hymn for me for this is I Am the Bread of Life, written by Sister Suzanne Toulon, a Sister of Mercy, when she was teaching high school. She wrote it one day, didn't like it, crumbled it up, threw it into a trash bin. One of her students heard her working on it, got it out of the trash can and said, "No, this is good," because she's like, "No, it's junk." And the student's like, "No, this is good." And it has become probably one of the more widely known Eucharistic hymns, definitely in the Catholic Church, and it's there in the hymnal 1982. So specifically with that hymn, it's verses 1, 4, and 5. I am the bread of life, and then I am the resurrection and the life, you who believe in me, and then verse number 5. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, directly from John's Gospel. When Seth was hiring me, I told him I'm a big picture person, and what I mean by that is I don't look when I'm working on putting music together, whether it's a Sunday or a season. I don't look necessarily at just the music. I kind of approach, if I can be a bit profane here, putting Sunday together like putting together a production musical theater. We have a script, a BCP. We have costumes, vestments, choir. We have staging. We have choreography. We have music. And I like to look at the whole thing. What's the room looking like? Who's moving where, when, why, and how? So that hopefully the liturgical experience seems cohesive and makes more sense to you, to us who are leading the worship. So that, that being said, when I look at the music of Lent, I tend not to focus on the passion of Jesus. I think there's a time and place for that. I don't think Lenten is all about we're horrible people and we put Jesus on the cross. I look at it, like I said, through that lens of initiation, the catechumenate, and Lent as a time for us, baptized believers, to reclaim our baptismal commitment. So as I was describing the catechumenate process, some of you were probably thinking, oh my God, really? I can't imagine what that's like, for me to be standing in front of a congregation and somebody talking to them about my conversion. I have to say, my experience has, in working with the catechumenate, is that it's becoming Christians it's a communal event. But those of us in the pews have also been able to use those rituals and those moments as time for us to think, wow, can I, where am I on this Christian journey? And the heavy prayers of Lent that would also allow us to scrutinize our lives, and at Easter then reclaim our own commitment, that we can make the baptismal commitment again. In the Catholic Church on Easter Sunday, we don't say the creed's not said. The baptismal commitment is renewed, and there's an asperges. As you know, so when we have baptisms here, after the baptism of the baby, there's the procession around, and Seth will say, so we can remember our baptisms. That's exactly what happens in the Catholic Church. And I've read somewhere, Seth and I have talked about this, somewhere that's an option in the Episcopal Church too. So yeah, Lent, again, just an opportunity for us to take time to reflection, renewal, and reclaiming our own commitment to our baptismal covenant. So that's basically my lens, this putting together Lent this year. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Joy.
Thank you so much. I just had a question about Rose Sunday, which I believe is the fourth Sunday of
Yes.
Lent. We're doing Amazing Grace. The theme is healing, and the Flower Guild is going to go all out. You can have a lot of flowers there because
Excellent.
we have no flowers the rest of Lent. Could you talk a little about the history of Rose Sunday? Is it just a time to break from Lent a little bit? Or?
Yeah,
Thank you.
there's in Lent it's the fourth Sunday, and in Advent it's the third Sunday. It's kind of like, hey, there's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not white or it's not green yet, but just we've just taken a little. We've turned a corner. Yeah, that's my understanding basically of what those Sundays are. Anne?
Mothering, the fourth Sunday of Lent is the light, but it's also known as the Mothering Sunday. That's the English Mother's Day. It was a day a long time ago when servants were given time off to go visit their families.
Interesting.
That's my understanding. Anyway.
Interesting. We'll have to give the maid off at home.
Michael, I just want to say that, and I don't, forgive me, it sounds very stereotypic and getting into all kinds of, I don't know, attitudes, but I really appreciate when you, and no pressure, when you choose a hymn written by a woman. You know, we heard today in the reading something about the eyes of the heart, you know, and, you know, sometimes I'm singing a hymn and I go, I bet a woman wrote this. And I look, you know, I look at the Board of Worship and I go, yeah, I'm feeling it. And so yeah, no pressure, but
No.
I notice, not that I don't respond to the hymns and your music all the time, but I notice that touch and I appreciate it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I want to say I've been working in the Episcopal Church since, well, before I was here, I spent a year at St. Mark's. So I'm awful with math, so you figure it out how long I've been working in the Episcopal Church. So not that long. One thing I have, actually I've learned a number of things about music in the Episcopal Church, but one thing is, so we have the Hymnal 1982, great book, good book, especially those of us who have studied music and all that stuff, but it's not 1982 anymore, okay? So there are a number of supplements and other resources. And I do want to say virtually all the music that I've chosen since I've been here comes from one of those resources. I wanted to be very, very, very careful that I didn't bring 33 years of Roman Catholic and foist it on you. I feel very comfortable here in a liturgical tradition because that's in my blood. I mean, I've just been doing it forever. So I like liturgical worship very, very much. But I want to be very sensitive about the Episcopal tradition, and I want to be very sensitive to the Christ Church tradition as well. That's why Scott left oodles of bulletins from years gone by, which I referenced specifically in my first year all the time. So anyway, but everything, just about everything, like the gospel acclamation that we did this morning, that glory to you, word of God, that's from an ISO resource. It's not necessarily Catholic, but it's a broader liturgical thing. But so there are a number of other resources. There's Wonder, Love, and Praise, the green books that we have in the pew. There is My Heart Sings Out, a reference to kids' music. So that song that we did for the anthem, that's from that book. There is Leave Us, Lift Every Heart and Sings, the gospel book. So I've decided to follow Jesus is from that book. But there's another book called Voices Found. It's text and music written solely by women. And I reference that not as much as I should, if I can be honest. But as a little thing about next Sunday, March 8th, in the American Guild of Organists, which is a national professional organization for organists and church musicians, next Sunday is Woman Composer Sunday. And both the prelude and the communion organ pieces were written by women. And I'll be writing about that in my broadcast piece this week.
Of all the many oars you could pull, why did you choose RCIA to help out with that?
Oh.
And then I have a follow-up question is, where's your accent? From West Virginia.
I grew up in the northern panhandle. My parents lived closer to the Pittsburgh airport than James and I lived to Milwaukee's. So the accent that I grew up with was more Pittsburghese than wait and talk like this. Where I come. So the RCIA. The reason I really focused on the RCIA is I've just had so many years of working with those rites and teaching them. I can't imagine, it's hard for me to approach Lent by removing that, the RCIA. It's just a huge part of my story. So that's what I bring. Anybody else?
When we're talking about you, I was raised as Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, and my sister married a Roman Catholic, and this was in the days when you Catholics were just beginning to sing songs in church and not just the priest.
Yeah.
And Lutherans really knew how to sing, and the Methodists too. I mean, so the Catholics have caught on.
Yeah. They're kind of on their way. It waxes and wanes. Some things move very slowly in the Roman Church. So I'd say they've barely just begun.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know how many people realize that you also have published hymns. Have any of your hymns that you have done throughout the years been in any of the hymnals?
No. When I was at the Cathedral, I did a lot more writing than I do now. And I don't know why. I just did. So I've written communion answer. Okay, I'll tell you this. So on Easter Sunday, the past couple years, the choir sings an introit, kind of like as a call to worship before we begin the opening hymn. I wrote that, and that's from the Catholic Easter Mass.
Well, you've also done a lot of the psalm tune settings.
I've done some of the psalms here. Yeah, I used to write a lot more. Nothing is in any hymnal. I have some psalms and psalm collection books. I mean, those really sell. You know, I get the letter from the publisher that says, "We don't send out checks less than $10."
Is this going to be a Time Life series, Michael's Greatest Hits?
You know, no. So maybe in a few years I might get my $10 check. I don't know.
So I have a question. I know there are like repeat readings of Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have like repeat hymns that you like to use associated with particular scriptures, or do you think fresh every time about what to do?
Oh, do I confess my sins?
Yes, please do. I'll tell you some of mine.
No. Actually, there were. As I was talking about some of the music that we're doing, there were some defaults I just automatically go to. Lent 4, Amazing, Psycho A, Lent 4, Amazing Grace. Lent 5, Psycho A, I'm the Bread of Life. I want to. This is where. That's a very good question. This is where I struggle, and it's all the time. I want to be sensitive to a number of things. One, that I'm just not constantly throwing new stuff out, that it's changing, because we're all creatures of habit. You know, you walk in. Those of you who've been here at Christ Church for how many years? You walk in on the first Sunday of Lent, and you know that the church is going to look a certain way. The church is the music kind of sound a certain way, you know, that kind of thing. So I really want to be sensitive to that. However, so we're in the 3-year cycle, A, B, and C, which means the readings come up every 3 years. We're different people every 3 years. So I just don't want to go into my computer, pull up the file from Second Sunday of Lent, Cycle A, 3 years ago, change the date and give it to Julie and go, here it is. I mean, I look at that, but I'm like, we're different people. I'm a different person. We're a different community. We're a different world. what text do we need to be singing? And I ask those questions every week. Virginia, my first year here was challenging. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me and going through that first liturgical cycle. And any of you who, Scott might be able to have some experience with this. I have found whenever I've gone to a new position, that going through that first liturgical cycle is so important because I didn't, I started in October. I didn't know what to expect in Advent, and I didn't know what to expect in my first Lent. And let me go through it and figure that out. But I always, it's like, man, what can we sing? What do we need to sing? There's some, and I do want to say this too. I thought about this. I don't always pick stuff I like. I don't. There's some, and I plan far in advance. So I can, pull up a planning sheet and go, oh, okay. But there are some Sundays I can pull up a planning sheet. I'm like, oh, okay. This is because it's not about me. This is about our community. And when I've spoken with other music directors, friends of mine, when I'm doing talks and reflections, I say, I don't think we're doing our job well if there's not at least one person who's like, God, the music today. I think we're all old enough. 1970s Squire station wagons. Remember those? Country Squire station. And we're all on the trip. And the question becomes, who's in charge of the one radio? What station? Really? What station? We didn't have those. So whose music are we listening to today? So I kind of look at that. It's like, last week. So I will say I liked the music last week. I don't know why, but so we started with the Great Litany with an updated text. It's not the text that was in hymn 1982. It was an updated text, and then we did the simple chant psalm, and then we did Jesus Tempted in the Desert with a great text and that solid hymn tune I love, which Catholics don't sing, by the way. And then the choir did the Richard Ferrand Call to Remembrance. They did it beautifully. And then we did the David Hurd, which we're doing now, the Sanctus and the Lamb of God. David Hurd in New York City, American chant. Then we did Lead Me, Guide Me. Man, we had stuff all over the place. It was pretty eclectic, and I didn't set out to do it that way. It's just the way it unfolded. I'm like, this is kind of good. This was cool. Every Sunday's not going to be like that. Anything else? So thank you very, very much. I do want to say, if any of you have any questions, comments, think of anything, emailing me is the best route. Happy to hear what you have to say or answer any questions.